You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, welcome to a Monday, talking Star Wars on a Monday.
It's here.
Yeah, well, that's true. You really want to get into it that quick? Forget.
I'm sorry.
I may dispense.
I got a little excited. I apologize.
I may dispense with the pleasantries. I understand. It's okay, but I figure maybe we would set it up a little bit because, as is often the case, and this is true with just about any live stream, what ends up happening is that people end up signing on a little late, and, then it's kind of like we're premiering it and nobody's there. So, yes, the premiere dropped, what was it, last Wednesday? I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was. I think it was last Wednesday. And you had said, I think you were the one actually that said that, oh yeah, this thing is going to hit or something this week or something.
This week. Mm-hmm.
And, it's one of those things that you have to take it with a grain of salt, right? I mean, a lot of times things are said in the Star Wars world and doesn't always happen. But this time, much to at least my complete surprise, it really did. Now, I will say this, though. It was time for it to drop. I mean, you and I have had several conversations saying, look, this show is premiering on May 25th, and it's mid-March. They really need to start showing us something. And at first, I thought it was going to be a 30-second teaser trailer or something, but this thing ended up being like a full-blown minute-and-a-half thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to, and I don't think this is the, excuse me, I don't think this is going to be the big one. I think there's going to be another one that's might be a little bit longer than this, like maybe a 2-minute one.
Yeah, or like 2.5 minutes. So basically, I haven't had a chance to test it today. That's the only problem. I did test it when I made the thing, so I think we could safely show this trailer. But I just hope everything works. All right, so are you ready to react to the Obi Wan trailer?
Let's get it.
All right, let's do it. It's cool, a little section of Tatooine.
Yeah.
We lost.
Got the young Luke going.
Stay hidden.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, that was cool. And of course, you got Duel of the Fates.
There's no audio though playing on my
To hunting Jedi.
Really? I got audio.
This patience.
end. Lucky you.
Yeah, there's audio going.
Jedi cannot help what they are. Their compassion
This was a cool. That was a cool
leaves a
shot.
trail.
Yeah, that's a really cool shot.
Kind of giving
The
that Pirates of the
Jedi
Caribbean
code is
vibe.
like an itch. He cannot help it. Where is he?
Yeah.
Yes. It's amazing how much it looked like it once when
Yeah, this thing is
Rebels.
this is looking really incredible, I have to say. Of course, you get a little Vader breathing.
I thought that was sweet.
Yeah, that was actually pretty cool. And I mean, honestly, there was a lot of things really to unpack and to like about this whole trailer. One of the things that jumped out immediately that I was really happy that they addressed was the fact that, it basically, when Obi-Wan starts talking about, the fight is done and we lost or something like that, because I think a lot of the show has to focus around, we're 10 years out from Revenge of the Sith, and it's like, how does that affect him mentally, emotionally? The
Yeah.
fact that what happened at the end of Revenge of the Sith, he was an instrumental part in that, good or bad. And
Right.
so, you have to wonder from his perspective, it's like, well, how's he dealing with the loss? And he's seeing the Empire growing and becoming more powerful around him. And to know that, he was instrumental in letting this happen.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. You got to probably wonder, like, hearing the shop talk to people, like, oh, the Empire this, the Empire that, and this has happened. Did you hear about this? And then all the atrocities that you hear that are taking place. But it's not even just he failed, but Yoda did too. And
Hmm.
it's really a thing too, because everybody kind of forgets that, like, okay, Yoda did go up against Palpatine, and granted, he put up a very, very valiant fight. And I think, given time and just keeping it one on one, Yoda might have bested Palpatine. The thing is that, he just saw that the odds were not in his favor. He couldn't stop all those clone troopers and keep up with Palpatine too. I mean, that would just been even too much for even him.
Right.
So he had to kind of cut his losses and live to fight another day, pretty much. And so I often think about, like, and they aren't in contact with each other to kind of uplift each other. Like Obi-Wan's on Tatooine, Yoda's on Dagobah. They're all kind of like, they're both isolated in their own respective things. And fortunately, Yoda doesn't have to hear the chatter, but I'm sure he can feel things in the Force. But like Obi-Wan is really amongst the people, and he's really getting to see and hear what the Empire, and just really see firsthand what the Empire is doing to everybody and everything. And he knows that Anakin is a big part of this. And
Hmm.
he can't even call him Anakin anymore. Now he's Vader. And it's I definitely has to take a toll, on him emotionally.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because I didn't, and this is funny. By the way, I know the reason why you didn't have the audio is because on the bus that's going out to you, it wasn't activated. So it went
Hmm.
out to everybody except you. I don't know. And we might even watch it again, like, later on, just
Roll it
to
again.
reference again. Yeah, exactly. But there's one thing that you brought up that I hadn't really even thought about, but it's true. Up until that point, he always had Anakin to rely on, to help, to support, and everything else. And now Anakin's actually the problem. He's the big
Hmm.
enemy now. And
Yeah.
now Obi-Wan, for the first time, well, I mean, keeping in mind that this is like 10 years later, but still, I mean, during this time period, from the time that Obi-Wan himself was like 20 or so, up until the events of Revenge of the Sith, he actually always had Anakin to rely on and to support, and they were a team.
Well, not just that, not just to really cut you off, but yeah, think about it. Like, he has not just Anakin, but so when he lost Qui-Gon, and after the Phantom Menace, he still had the council there to kind of continue
Hmm.
his training, to help guide him to be the Obi-Wan that we know him to be. And then, of course, even when he ran into issues with Anakin, they were there to step in. But like, there's literally, at the worst possible moment in the whole galaxy, there's no one for him to turn to. Like, Mace is gone, Yoda's on Dagobah,
Exactly.
like the rest of the council's been wiped out, Jedi have been wiped out, or they're in hiding, so they don't even want to reveal it. You see what I'm saying? Like, he's really just
Yeah,
out here by
he's
himself.
really on his own. And one of the other things that I really loved about this trailer, one of my other favorite lines, is when the Grand Inquisitor was basically saying, the Jedi Honor Code or something like that is an itch that they have to scratch, like they
Man,
can't resist.
I absolutely love that dialogue, just because it's so true, first of all. And it's kind of like, they have the more pressure it's within, they can't help it, they have to do something, and that's what's going to reveal them. Like, that's how we're going to find them and deal with them, because they can't help but be who they are, or what they were
Hmm.
trained to be. and we're using that against them. And I just think that is just absolutely brilliant. Even though
Yeah.
we haven't seen much from that, it's like
No, but you
the
can,
idea is there.
and you get the tone. You get the tone that they are really actively seeking. This isn't just an opportunistic thing. You know, if you happen to run
Mhm.
across a Jedi, deal with it. I mean, no, these guys, they're not just hunting them, they're trying to flush them out.
Yeah.
And even though they didn't really specifically say it, it makes me wonder in this series when they're going to figure out that it's not just, say, Jedi in general, but that Obi-Wan himself, like, they actually figure out, oh, he's still alive.
Mhm.
You know, and I mean, obviously that's going to happen because Vader and him are pretty much going to have the battle of the century or whatever. You know, they're going to confront each other again. But it makes me wonder if you just look, and we will roll the trailer again later on in the show. But if you look at all the scenes, there's an active hunt going on, and they're actually trying to flush them out. And you've got the Grand Inquisitor. You have that other, I guess she's another Inquisitor.
Mhm.
You know, you have a lot of the Empire that's going to be present in this thing. I mean, this isn't just going to be some isolated little Book of Boba Fett style thing. I think that even if a lot of it does take place on Tatooine, you're going to get a sense and a feel for the galaxy as a whole, like what's going on. In other words, I think
Mhm.
it's actually going to be somewhat of a continuation of what the Bad Batch was doing as
Mm.
far as world building and showing the galaxy.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, being on Tatooine, and I know a lot of people are tired of kind of coming back to Tatooine, but you have to realize, like, in this story, like, it really does serve as a huge focal point for a lot of different things, because not only did Anakin come from Tatooine, but now his son Luke grew up on Tatooine, and Obi-Wan was hiding out to protect Luke on Tatooine. You know what I mean? It's just there's a
Mm-hmm.
lot of things that just kind of happen. There, the huts are there, so it really is a a hub for the galaxy, at least for the Outer Rim.
Yeah, you know, I
And
was reading
so,
there's a new planet that's going to be introduced in the show. It's like oh man, I wish I can remember the name of it now. It's like Diaya something.
mm,
Something. So it was one of the criticisms where it was like, no, there's going to be a new planet in it. But even if that wasn't the case, it's going to basically be kind of a Hong Kong style planet. It's going to have that kind of vibe to it.
oh
But
yeah.
a couple of the things, it's kind of like you said, you know, you have to be really careful about the whole Tatooine thing because on one hand, yes, you understand that people have what I would call Tatooine fatigue, but on the other hand, it's like you said, I mean, a lot of the story pretty much originates from that planet. And if you go through each of the trilogies, maybe not so much the sequel trilogy, but definitely the prequel and the original trilogy, there's a lot of key things that happen. There's a lot of key things that originate from that planet.
Hmm.
And let's face it, I can understand the criticism if, say, you know, the Rise of Skywalker suddenly went back there or whatever. But I mean, if you're telling
Or
the
at the end,
story,
maybe.
right, but if you're telling the story of Obi-Wan during this time period, what do you want? That's where he was.
Exactly.
You know, it's like, I mean,
Exactly.
it really would actually make less sense, and to me, it would be more jarring and more of a disservice if it didn't largely take place on Tatooine. But
Hmm.
again, I think what's cool is that you're seeing a lot of really different. It's the same, but it's different. I mean, when you really look at the trailer and everything, and you see everything that's going on, it's just like, man. I mean, this show looks really intense and really good.
Yeah. I mean, you got like rooftop scenes, run across, rooftops and, blaster fire. And the cool thing is, like, the only lightsabers you see are from the Inquisitors. You still don't see, Obi-Wan
Right.
and everybody's wondering, like, which lightsaber is he going to have? Is he going to have the one that he had in New Hope? Or is he going to have still um the older version that he had? So, um it's really going to be interesting. I really did enjoy Even them just getting a snapshot of Luke, just him watching over him,
Mm-hmm.
with that whole, him sitting on top of the house doing the whole speeder thing, and just
Now this
once
is pod
again,
racing.
right, showing him kind of imagining himself, because he's always wanted to fly, and he always wanted to, when he got older, he wanted to do all that and be a pilot. So just kind of hitting that beat once again, just reiterating that point, and nailing that home. But we didn't see Vader. Did you miss him
No, I don't think
in
so,
this particular?
because I think it's basically the same thing as Rogue One. Well, even though not initially, but in later trailers we ended up seeing him. And look, this is only the first trailer from this show. There's a lot that could happen. We could start seeing more. It's almost the same thing as Vader in Rogue One or the Emperor in Rise of Skywalker. It was like on the initial trailers, you didn't really see either of them. You heard them. You were aware of their presence. You knew it was going to happen. But it's going to be interesting to me to see what the second and potentially third trailer for Obi-Wan is, because it seems like this one's focus was Obi-Wan feeling somewhat lost and dealing with the loss of everything that he knew, along with his sense of responsibility to watch over Luke, and then also showing that the Grand Inquisitors and the Empire are really actively hunting Jedi. They're trying to flush them out. They're really trying to get rid of them. We thought that when they gave Order 66 at the end of Revenge of the Sith, and we saw all those cutaway scenes where, it's like, okay, they're killing Jedi here, killing Jedi there. That was really the beginning. The real effect of Order 66, that what we were probably looking for in Episode 3, is probably going to happen in this show. So I didn't really miss Vader. Because that Vader is going to be there, and he's got to play somewhat of a role, but I still wonder exactly how much of a role he's going to play in this show.
Yeah. Well, my question, all right, do you think we're going to see him at all in any of the trailers?
If we do, it'll be the last one. I mean, because if you think about it, they showed him in the Entertainment Weekly special. So we've seen photos of him. We've seen the photos of him in the show. So the fact that they released actual Obi-Wan show photos, it stands to reason to me that he would eventually pop up in a trailer. It just depends, and that's where I was going with it. It depends on what they're trying to do. So you have basically the story and everything that they're following with this trailer, but what are they doing? What's the next trailer going to focus on? Because there's going to be multiple facets to this show.
Right.
So it just depends on what they want to emphasize. What part of the show do they want to emphasize for the second trailer? What do they want to emphasize for the third trailer, if there is one? That, to me, is what's going to determine whether or not you see Vader or not. Or they could do even though Rogue One's probably a bad example, because, 90% of everything in the trailers we never saw in the film. But if you remember I think it was the second trailer for Rogue One, you saw that shot of Vader aboard the Death Star with the red panels and all that stuff. And, there were some different shots of him, just like really quick shots. They were almost nothing. They could have almost been stills. That's how quick they went. And it wasn't like there was any action in them. We certainly didn't see the ending.
No, definitely not.
And if you think about it, really, Vader was only in a couple of scenes. He was on that Mustafar scene and then the end. I don't think I'm missing anything else. You heard him referenced.
Yeah, it was Mustafar, and then that quick little scene when he was on the ship, when he was watching not Jeddah, but Scarif kind of blow up.
Oh yeah.
And then he hopped on. Then the next thing we see him is in that corridor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I count all that as is basically one,
One.
because you also see him when, the ship kind of blows apart and he watches a Tana 4 take off, and he, you know what's going to happen next at that point. So, I mean, that's kind of all one. But there was a couple of scenes in the trailer of Rogue One that showed him that you never really saw him in. So,
Right.
might not be the best example. But here's another question.
Okay.
This is something that I was thinking earlier today when I knew we were going to do this topic. Do you think that we're going to see the origin of when Obi-Wan starts calling himself Ben?
I do. That's a good question. But I do.
I know. I just thought of that today. I was just like, because that's how Luke always knew him, Oh, you mean old Ben?
Yeah, definitely. And I could see that happening, especially being at that transport where they had it looked like a bunch of refugees were just kind of like trying to escape from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I could see him like, oh, hey man, what's your name? And Ben, Ben Kenobi. Oh, okay, nice to meet you, Ben. And then he just kind of, because like the whole thing, like they're all trying to be, and so you start saying Obi Wan Kenobi, and that's what I mean. Like I don't even know how common Kenobi of a name,
Yeah,
that
I know,
is,
man.
or
I don't
because
know if
anytime you
Kenobi's
hear
like
that, you would
Smith or Jones or something.
yeah, Robinson, or it's just kind
Yeah,
of like, and that's kind of a very unique name, So you start saying, oh, your name is anything Kenobi, even if you aren't, let's just say, even if you aren't Obi-Wan, the fact that you have that name draws interest because of your lineage. So like, okay, you're a Kenobi. Well, maybe you have the Force too. Let's wipe you out. Even if you don't, if you're not Obi-Wan, you're related to him. So there's a
yeah,
good possibility that you could have the Force.
right. And that's basically it. To me, I think a lot of it hinges upon the fact that he has to start adopting that name pretty early. Like, I could almost
Mm-hmm.
see him start calling himself that right from the very first episode of the show
Yeah.
and carrying it on. And then, of course, it makes me wonder, too, just based on this trailer, is he just simply watching over Luke, or does Luke actually know him yet at this point?
Yeah, that's also a good point. We did see Ben and Baru, but Owen and Baru. So it probably stands to reason that he's reintroduced himself back over there, and it's like, hey guy. Well, I mean, not even reintroduced, because he's the one who brought him to him. He just kind of stayed around. So when they see him out, and something tells me that Owen is the one who's going to call him. Oh, this is Ben. Like something tells me that it's going to be Owen, and Obi-Wan's just going to roll with it. Like, okay,
Maybe, but you brought up a good point earlier, though. I mean, clearly we know that Obi-Wan's going to be going off planet and things like that. I mean, if you're going on transports or even going into the city, you're not going to be throwing that name around too much.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really, I kind of think that it's a little thin that he's still keeping the name of Kenobi.
Yeah.
It's almost like why they didn't change Luke Skywalker's name is beyond me, too. I mean,
Yeah.
I get it. Tatooine is extremely remote, but it just seems to me like if this kid is the fate of the galaxy at this point, maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to, just take that extra step and hide him a little bit more. And maybe not again. I mean, maybe Skywalker is a somewhat of a common name. Who knows?
Well, yeah. And then the fact that you're traveling, it's kind of like traveling to different worlds. Is kind of like, traveling all over the country. I mean, all over the globe here, for them. So it's like, okay, let's hop on the plane and hit China real quick, or let's hop over the plane and hit, the Philippines, or, Africa, or whatever. It's like, okay, you got so many different people and so many different names, it's possible, I guess, that you kind of just blend in, or you won't even think about it. But then again, like I said, 10 years after Revenge of the Sith, you assume that he's dead anyway because he hasn't popped up anywhere. So I mean, maybe it isn't. You just kind of forget his name. Kind of is forgotten.
Well, there was
You
a
know.
thing to where the Emperor really, because there was an article or something that was talking about how on earth can you extinguish? I mean, you had like 10,000 Jedi running around, and everybody knew who they were, and it was a common thing, even in a remote area like Tatooine.
Oh yeah.
And it's because the Emperor basically, he would do terrible things, that people would mention it, he would stop it. I mean, he really took great lengths to try to erase the history of the Jedi in a very short period of time. So it wasn't like people really forgot who they were. They were just afraid to say anything about it.
Mm.
And that was the whole thing. And then, eventually when you're afraid to say anything about it, well, then it's like, hey, I mean,
I'm just not mentioning it at all, and eventually you kind of forget about it almost.
well, it's not even that, but I mean, any, like your kids or anything like that, like if you never mention it or whatever, it's kind of like the next generation down isn't really going to know anything about it too much. And so I think what's interesting is we're seeing the beginnings of that here. And to me, that's really interesting. And it's just overall, I mean, there's just so much in this trailer that, I mean, it's just really cool. I mean, this thing so far, I have to say, and I was one of those guys that was really looking forward to this, I mean, I really wanted to see this movie. I mean, when it was first going to be a movie, there was even talk at first that it might even be a trilogy of movies. But when it was just a single standalone movie, I was that guy that was just like, you know what? Yes. And I remember you were kind of like, don't think so. But, and then I remember it even got a little heated on one show where it was kind of like, what are you going to do? You going to show this guy just kind of sitting around, watching over this kid? I mean, really? Is that the movie that you really want to see? I mean, it was getting like that,
Yeah, I definitely remember.
So, I mean, I had some really high expectations of what this thing could be. And I have to say, this trailer has actually exceeded my expectations about this show. And it could very easily take out even The Mandalorian as the best live-action TV show right now.
It could. And going in, I'm glad you kind of brought that up. Do you think, or no, I'm gonna say that. What story did you get the most out of the trailer? Like, what seems really solid to you about that the trailer delivered for you?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think it's really more that this isn't just going to be a simple, hey, we're just hunting the Jedi, and if we happen to cross paths with one, we're going to go ahead and take them out. And I mean, Obi-Wan is literally, he and other Jedi are being flushed out. And you see the scene where, the Inquisitors are going into what looks like a market or a bar or something like that. They're drawing their lightsabers, they're pretty much, if they suspect that you're a Jedi or a Force user or something like that, you're going to have to deal with these guys. I mean, they're on a rampage. This isn't just going to be some passive, we're on the lookout, and if we see anything suspicious, which is really the vibe that you get when you look at the story of Kanan in A New Dawn, particularly. Because a big part of A New Dawn dealt with Kanan very much being in the same boat as the main character in Jedi Fallen Order, where they were a Padawan, they find themselves where it's not like they have a master anymore, they have to hide the fact they're Force users and everything like that. And Kanan had to be drawn into it again by Hera, and that's really what they base Rebels off of. So you have these stories where you have these people who are Padawans, or maybe they were just newly minted Jedi Knights or whatever, and now they find that they have to just take on regular jobs and kind of hide the fact that they're Force users. Whereas this is almost the flip side of that. They're going out and they're actively seeking them and they're flushing it out. And, they're showing some dude hanging in the public square like, okay, this will probably bring out a Jedi kind of a thing. Like, they're really taking steps to, no, we're going to go into every recess and find these guys. And it's the other thing I got about it, like I mentioned too, is Obi-Wan realizing and coming to terms with just, the fight was lost. And, now I got to do something else. And I got this kid I got to watch over. And it's sort of like you said. You said this in a previous show. There's not a whole lot they could really do. You got 6 episodes. Now, granted, you could look at that because we did say, I think, didn't you find some confirmation or something that this is going to be like an hour for each episode? So as long as we don't get like some 27-minute, 35-minute episode, if we actually get 55 to an hour and 5, if we really get like solid 1 hour episodes, that's basically a 6-hour film. So you could do a lot in that. But
True.
I think that pretty much it's going to be Obi-Wan trying to keep Owen and Beru out of trouble, out of the eye. It really makes me wonder, this big battle of the century thing. Is this actually going to happen on Tatooine? Is Vader going to come back to Tatooine because, he senses stuff? That would be the only thing that would be a little weird to me because...
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, because that would make 4
happen.
not make sense,
Yeah, because one, you should not have come back. Like, well, you came to me, you know what I mean? So I should be saying that, or whatever. But beyond that, I do have a couple of questions that I want to ask you. Do you, as far as what you might think we will see in the series? One, so we know that prior to all the events of Revenge of the Sith, whenever the Jedi were looking for younglings, they kind of like had a committee, I guess if you will, that would kind of like search through the Force and try to find these younglings who were Force sensitive. And if they were young enough, then they would bring them in and they'll meet with the parents and say, look, hey, we're going to take your child and train him as the way of a Jedi and blah, 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 blah. I'm wondering how the Sith are going to do that. Like with Palpatine, Vader, the Inquisitors, like how do they locate, Force sensitive kids across the galaxy? Because are you saying there's a gang of Inquisitors that are large enough to go across that? Or because we know when we watch the Inquisitors, we've only seen a few. And I'm not saying that that's the only amount that we, they're available, but I'm just saying like those are the only ones we've seen. So are there a limited amount of Inquisitors? And then, of course, you're hunting Jedi depending on where they are, because you're not just hunting, kids or Padawans or things like that, but you're also hunting, actual full-fledged Jedi who may be masters a knight at varying degrees. So they vary in strength and power. So sometimes you might need 2 or 3, like you probably would need 2 or 3 just to deal with Obi-Wan himself because he's so powerful. So how do you think that they're going to, or you think we're going to see that, like how they're going to seek out these kids?
Well, first of all, they're not going to seek out the kids because, it's almost like Luke, right? Until Luke became almost 20 years old, he was completely unaware of even what the Force was. He just kind of chalked his abilities up to, hey, I guess I'm really good at piloting stuff. He had never even heard of the Force. And by Palpatine extinguishing this knowledge from the galaxy, trying to hunt down every Force-sensitive kid isn't necessary, because the whole idea behind the Jedi doing that was that you needed to get them at a certain age, like as young as possible, so all they knew was the Jedi way, so you could raise them to not have attachments, to not fall into the traps that the dark side might use or whatever. But if you never really develop it, and then you wipe out every reference to the Force, to Jedi and stuff, and basically blot it out, there's really no point in doing it. You could just let it go. Now, if a kid started to show a little bit, and that's what happened with Luke, Luke was nearly 20 years old, he still didn't know. Well, the Force? Yeah, well, the Force is, it's kind of like he didn't even know. So, but then again, he goes and he blows up the Death Star, and, Vader's like, the Force is with this one. Well, now he's wondering, because he didn't know his last name was Skywalker until he started inquiring about this guy. Because, and they deal with this a lot in the comics and in some of the novels and stuff like that, where Vader basically followed up, like, okay, I want to know more about this guy that blew up the Death Star, because I think that
I felt something.
yeah, I think he's got some Force stuff going on, and we might need to deal with this guy. And then when he found out he was Luke Skywalker, and then he figured out it was his kid, well, that's what the current comic issues have been dealing with. The current Darth Vader series is now he's going to go out and get revenge on everybody who knew.
Mm-hmm.
And we're at the point now with, him dealing with Dorme and stuff. So it's kind of an interesting time.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, so, Phantom Menace, little Anakin, was using the Force, but he had no idea he was doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, you gotta, and my whole thought process is that you have Inquisitors on Tatooine, and you have two of the most powerful Force users on that planet, Obi Wan and a young Luke. Now, of course, Luke's power hasn't grown, of course, to the point, because he's still a kid. But even Anakin, like I said, Anakin have probably half the age that Luke is, though at least from what we can see. And
not
Qui-Gon
really. I mean,
was
when we first meet Anakin, he's 9 years old.
Okay, well, let's just say Luke is 9. Even in this, though, it's like, okay,
Luke could be 10. 10 years after Revenge of the Sith. Luke was born right at the end of Revenge of the Sith. He's 10 years old.
But okay, 10. It doesn't really matter. But my point is that, like, okay, because all it does is kind of strengthen it in a way, because it's like, all right, if he's 10 years old and he's, and Anakin, we met him at 9, and Qui-Gon can see, like, yo, this kid really has abilities. Why wouldn't you? I mean, why wouldn't Luke have that same radiance in the Force, is what I'm saying.
Because at the time, the Jedi are looking for Force users in order to get them to be part of the Jedi Order, so they wouldn't eventually grow up and turn to the dark side. The Sith don't care.
What I'm saying is,
what's Anakin doing? He's using it to win pod races and stuff like that. I mean, it's not like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, like, okay, I guess what I'm saying, if you're looking at it from the standpoint of this, you're hunting Jedi, like that's their purpose right now. They're trying to hunt the Jedi and wipe them out. Okay, if you leave some kid who possibly could be, I mean, granted, he was, it's like, okay, you don't know what he's going to grow up to be. And so, even though you might have, okay, he might have gotten off Tatooine, he might have hooked up with another Jedi he found on another planet somewhere, and he ends up becoming still Luke Skywalker. Like, you missed that opportunity to take him out. And so that's my whole thing. It's like, okay, if I'm already on Tatooine, why wouldn't I take them all out?
No, because Luke was either going to be a farmer, which is what Owen was pushing him to do, trying to get him to stay for the harvest, or Luke wanted to sign up for the Academy. Luke was trying to join the Empire, like every other good citizen.
All right.
If he had never developed the Force, they're hunting the Jedi because the Jedi are already these trained guys who, that would almost be like some guy who's a sharpshooter, but all he's doing is deer hunting. He has no idea anything about any military anything. Now, if a guy is already in the military and you need to take out a particular country's military, you're going to go after those guys. Some guy that might be really good at shooting and all he's doing is deer hunting, who cares? Luke was either going to be a farmer or he was going to join the Empire. And at the time when they sort of figured out, okay, well, now this guy is using some stuff for things that we don't like say blowing up our multi-trillion-dollar weapon. Now Vader wants to get a hold of him because once he finds out, what's funny was the fact that he was a pilot that blew up the Death Star, that didn't even matter to Vader as much. It was when he found out that, hey, he's my kid. Grandson of the Force, this could be a problem because Obi-Wan's already gotten a hold of him. he knew that because Obi-Wan and Luke were together on the Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
And so Vader put 2 and 2 together, which is why he kept saying in Empire Strikes Back, Obi-Wan has taught you well and all this other stuff. So he knew that Luke was now receiving Jedi training and that he could be a threat if he continued on that path. Before he was on that path, nobody cares. You get these Force-sensitive guys. I mean, there's a lot of, people that have some natural affinity maybe for something, but they never train in anything. So it's not like Broom Kid would grow up and be a threat to Vader and Palpatine.
Okay. Well, I'll give you that. Now, the other part to that question is, do you think we're going to see, or do you think Obi-Wan is going to actually mask his presence? Because he's on, he is a master and he is walking around Tatooine, how do they not feel him? I mean, not saying that they don't, but I mean,
yeah, I was going to say, I think
there's something
they do.
You think, well, I think they do eventually. Well, I think something's going to tip them off to it. Like, I don't think they're going to initially just catch him, because I think as we have seen in A New Hope, we've seen how slick Obi-Wan can be, at times where he's, even when he was sneaking around, like he was sneaking around the Death Star too, and Vader still felt him.
Yeah, they couldn't find him until Obi-Wan wanted to be found. But yeah, it's kind of like, man, I feel his presence. It's like, what is this?
Exactly. It's like now it's that itch again. Like, okay, I feel it. I just don't know why I feel it.
Yeah, and even Tarkin was trying to be like, well, I mean, surely he's dead by now. What are you talking about? It's
exactly.
It's like, you're crazy, dude.
Yeah. Right. So these Inquisitors.
It's a good point.
Do you think he's going to? What I'm saying, do you think, because it seems like they have a vested interest in Tatooine, so you got to kind of wonder, how was Obi-Wan found out? Like, is it he found out because he did something and people realized it was him, or did he reveal himself and now they want to hunt him down and find this particular one because he's caused some issues? Or did they feel his presence in the forest when they first get there? Like, ooh, there's somebody here that we need to find, but where is he? Because somebody asked in the trailer, where is he? And I'm like, well, of course that could be any number. He might even be talking about Obi-Wan at the part. He could be talking about somebody else, for all we know. But I'm just saying, like, do you think Obi-Wan's going to be masking his presence, much like Yoda, was doing on Dagobah?
Well, and the nice thing about Dagobah was the fact that Yoda being so powerful, it's like he kind of had to do it. Plus, the other happy benefit of that was the fact that he needed the amplification of the Force in order to start clouding the dark side. And that was the going theory for a long time, actually, was that the dark side was being clouded by Yoda, and that's why Obi-Wan, Luke, they were able to hide, because on one hand, Tatooine's going to be the last place. I think that they purposely do this because they know that Vader will never, ever, ever go back there. Like, he hates Tatooine. He pretty much established that.
I'm surprised, honestly, he didn't blow it up.
Yeah, I know.
Because.
Right. Well, you blow it up, the sand gets everywhere, it's...
No, honestly, I think because they made a lot of money because of the smugglers and all the criminal elements.
Yeah, you can't blow it up, because first of all, the Hutts would have kind of an issue with that one. So, yeah, there's a lot of... Tatooine's kind of a backwater criminal planet, but at the same time, Vader just wouldn't really assume anything's going on there. He has no desire to go back there. It would remind him too much of his mother and all that stuff, and he was already struggling with some things. So it really is, from Palpatine and the Vader perspective, that's the ultimate place to hide out, because it's the one place he's never going to go back and look. Now, on the other hand, though, that is a good point. It's like, well, how come there's Inquisitors suddenly just crawling all over this planet, or at least seemingly so? And is that actually Tatooine? One of the first things that everybody got all up in arms about in The Force Awakens was like, we're back on Tatooine. It's like, well, no, we're not. We're on another desert planet called Jeddah. We're just assuming, or Jakku, yeah. Jeddah was Rogue One.
Rogue One.
And it was kind of the
2
same.
tubes.
You know, I mean, it was still a desertish planet. I mean, so that's a third one. But when you first look at this stuff, you just assume Tatooine, right? So you have Jakku, and it's like we're just assuming. I mean, we know that there's some Tatooine stuff because of Owen and Beru and Luke and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that every little scene that we saw in that trailer is actually on Tatooine. I mean, it probably is. And if that is the case, it's kind of like you said, well, what brought them back there? What's bringing these guys here? And because, you know, if there's a bright center in the universe, you're on the planet that it's farthest from, well, what brought them there? Now, the only thing I can think of is maybe because they know about Beru and Owen that, you know, there's, and it's kind of like you said, I mean, maybe Obi-Wan did something to reveal himself on one of the other planets that we visit, and they trace him back there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a lot of really cool, I think, unanswered questions in this thing. And so speaking of which, you know, just so we give ourselves a fresh perspective, let's roll it again. Yeah, you'll hear it this time. Yeah, it's Tatooine-esque.
The fight is done.
It also looks like the planet, what's what you call Mando?
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely Tatooine.
Yeah, no, that's definitely Tatooine.
Stay hidden. The key.
I always wondered if this was Camino.
Jedi. Is patience.
Ah, it's a good point, because it looks like it.
Jedi cannot help what they are. Their compassion leaves a trail.
So that must be the
Jedi
Hong Kong
Chinese
style
like
flag.
an
Yeah, that's...
itch.
Yeah.
He cannot help it. Where is he?
And I don't think that was on Tatooine when he asked that question. Nope.
You know, it'd be really cool if we saw Gideon in this.
Yeah, I was thinking that. Actually, when there was that figure that was kind of standing in that alley or
Yeah.
corridor, it kind of had a very Gideon-esque look to the character. I thought the same thing. I mean, on one hand, it's... I don't know, I would have mixed
tie things
feelings about
together.
that. But that's the problem. It's sort of like... It ties it together in a way that shrunk... I mean, I like the fact that we don't see every single person that's involved, you know, because that would shrink the Empire a little bit. I mean, think about it. If you have a war movie of some sort, you're not going to see every single general pop up or whatever if you were dealing with a particular story. And especially when you take into consideration this is taking place about 10 or 15 years earlier. It's like, I mean, don't get me wrong, in The Mandalorian at some point, if not season 3, at some point, they do need to clue us in a little bit on Gideon's backstory. Not so much just because, okay, he's a Moff, because you could just say, well, okay, he's a Moff, and he's a guy that's, you know, just pretty much taken over this little faction of the Empire, and he's like the other guys. But the problem is, he knows a lot about the Force, and he has a Darksaber. That requires a little bit of backstory, in my opinion. You know, it's kind of like, okay, if you're doing that, then, you know, we need to see what you're about. And for that reason, because the Emperor's alive, Vader's alive, and all that stuff, I wouldn't be upset if Gideon popped up and maybe we found a little bit of a... Because the last person that we knew that actually had the Darksaber, if I remember correctly, was Obi Wan. So if they wanted to do a little thing where Gideon pops in and maybe he gets the Darksaber from him, I don't know. I mean, I would still think that would be a little on the nose, maybe, but I mean, I could certainly see it though. And that's what I think that's one of the things that you have to look at when you look at just them expanding this particular era, say post Revenge of the Sith, the pre-Force Awakens, that big chunk of time. If they're going to, pardon the pun, but if they're going to play in that sandbox, then, you have to, you don't want to paint yourself into a corner, and you want to do it in a way that actually pays respect to the series and the franchise as a whole, but also takes it into some new directions. Now, of course, what I saw from this trailer, I would say that's definitely the case. That it's definitely giving us an expansion. It's telling us a story in a familiar era, but in a way, an era that hasn't been explored too much. Because like I said, I mean, the closest that we get really is Solo. Because this is the only other thing that's taking place kind of in that middle period of when the Empire first took over. As you can look at the Rogue One and New Hope thing it's a continual zenith, of course. They probably
yeah, but it's all kind of like all one big thing, though.
Well, and it's also unraveling at that point. That you can look at A New Hope as the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
Whereas this time period where Obi-Wan takes place is pretty much, this is where they're pretty much unopposed and they're just continuing to gain more and more power. So it'll be really interesting to see, exactly how that all plays out too. But it's it's definitely something that I think not only do they have to be really careful with, but they could have a lot of fun with it as well.
Oh yeah, definitely. And speaking of that, let me get your thoughts so far. Like, what is your favorite thing that you've seen in the trailer so far?
Probably the interaction where Obi-Wan is watching over Luke, mixed with a lot of the Inquisitors going around and pretty much flushing out any potential Jedi, because it gives you that sense. One of the things that was really cool to me about this is that you really get a sense of an invading force flushing out anybody that might represent opposition. This is the Empire kind of at its strongest, and it's not just them being overlords. I mean, they're just going around and the closest thing to like going door to door and dragging people out and shooting them or something. You had the person hanging. I mean, I like that whole aspect of it, because it shows me, number one, this is going to be another more adult-themed Star Wars project. They're not pulling any punches on this one. But I think that's probably my favorite thing. I mean, I would say if I had to pick a second favorite, it would be seeing all these different locations that they're going to, because that tells me that it's going to be a bigger story.
Right. Okay.
Well,
I think for me,
I was going to be like,
I was like, oh, okay, he probably wants me to say mine. Mine would probably be, I really did like that kind of underwater boardroom scene that they had with the Inquisitors.
that was cool.
It kind of
Yeah.
gave me, that was a cool look, and it kind of gave me like this weird, can't remember. I can't remember what James Bond movie was like that, but it was like they kind of had this guy had this underwater,
Spy Who
like,
Loved Me.
yeah, the underwater fortress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was just kind of like, that's what it kind of gave me, that, and that's what it kind of does. Obi-Wan is kind of like a weird little. He's not like quite like Cassie Andor, but it's kind of like a little spy thriller in a way, because it's almost like a Jason Bourne, like they're hunting him, but he keeps sidestepping and eluding them. I kind of getting that tone from the from this trailer as well. So between like all the Inquisitor scenes, pretty much are like right on my alley. I just think they're so cool. They're a great creation that that they've come up with, where you kind of have these dark side force users who are kind of like bounty hunters in a way. So yeah, I think those would be my my favorite.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I gotta say that I'm really excited about this. I hope that they even give us some more exposition. I wouldn't mind having some, more scenes with some conversations and basically painting the overall picture of where we are in the story and everything like that. I think that would be kind of cool. And of course, it will be interesting to see where Vader falls in all of this. I think that's going to be important, and it makes me wonder if we're going to get any Anakin scenes, whether they're from flashbacks or, maybe he's just, I don't know, chilling in the back to tank. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting that they're bringing Hayden Christensen to do this, because to be honest, and we don't even have any confirmation of James Earl Jones is doing the voice yet.
Yeah, that's the other big thing.
You got to wonder that. And why else bring Hayden Christensen back unless you're going to show him? I mean, they could do the whole disfigured, similar to what we've seen with Vader in the past. Because I thought it was cool. I remember sending you that article about, what Hayden Christensen thought of the whole Rogue One thing. Because, he didn't get to do that one.
Right.
But again, there was, he didn't really, because it wasn't necessary. I mean, continuity-wise, it's kind of cool to have him play Vader from now on, because he was Anakin.
Right.
I mean, as long as David Prowse was alive, and when David Prowse was actually more actively doing stuff, it's like, yeah, okay, he's the guy you would want. Right, he goes in the suit because that is the true continuity. But at the same time, unless you're actually showing a lot of scenes where he's not in the suit, it just seems to me like it's almost a waste. Even though for marquee value, it's kind of cool. And of course, Ewan McGregor talks about how, it was great to work with him again. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, overall,
Definitely.
I think that this is, this is going to be a really good show. Of course, we're looking forward to May 25th and to see what the first episode. And of course, when it comes out, naturally, we're going to review this thing. I mean, it goes without saying.
Wouldn't be a Star Wars show if you didn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. But I mean, it's just worth mentioning anyway, just to kind of put that in the ears of fans. But yeah, so the question, of course, becomes, what did you guys think? Now, of course, before you go and fill our comment section full of your thoughts on what you think of this whole Obi-Wan trailer that we played not once but twice for you. One time so Daryl could hear it. But make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, because it really does help the channel, helps us reach more people. And after all, more people that we got discussing Star Wars with us, the better off we'll be. So, we don't actually know what we're talking about this Friday yet, do we?
It hasn't been pinned down, but
no, it hasn't. I mean, I know we
have
got
a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff, and we have some choices. I mean, I've been kind of spoiled the last few weeks because we have known, and in fact, even had the links on YouTube already, so it'll be interesting. But yeah, just make sure that you guys, check us out this Friday at 8. As you know, we'll be talking about something Star Wars related. So until then, have a great rest of your week. And I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.